All right, so we're doing our second Plato session on the question of the value of justice. And last week we saw how Glaucon and Adeimantus presented Socrates with this problem of why bother being good, being morally just, if you could get away with being bad. Is justice really something that we pursue because we like it, we value it, we love it? Or do we only do it because we're afraid what will happen if we don't and we get seen and we get caught, right? And the point is made very focused when we think about how we act when nobody's looking. And if there's a difference, then we're like, maybe I do just value avoiding the appearance of injustice, but what I truly like is injustice, the ability to get away with it.
One thing that I was thinking about this week is, I think that there's another piece. It's not necessarily that what anyone else sees or just doing something good because it's good, but it's also the way that you feel after you do it. So I wonder also if you take the money or if you do something wrong and you feel bad, does that mean that you're not doing it because it's the right thing to do or because you're avoiding the way you're judging yourself?
Avoiding the way you're judging yourself? I'm not sure how the last piece fits into the equation, but the question is whether the feelings you're talking about are intrinsically linked to justice or arbitrarily attached. If they're arbitrarily attached, then they could be similarly attached to other activities, such as taking meth. So why face guilt and go to confession, have to deal with Father Vince and all this nonsense, all these Catholic crazy things? Oh, I feel terrible about myself. Oh, yeah, baby. Right? Drugs, it works. I got rid of my guilt. Amazing. Right? Of course, that doesn't actually work. Talk to drug addicts, even while they're high, they know they're not happy. So that suggests that happiness is not just a feeling, because we separate the illusion of happiness from the real thing, which means the real thing isn't the feeling, it's the activity that then seemed to link to this feeling. And that's why I asked the question about the alternative being, is it intrinsic? Now, that's where Socrates is going with this. So, yes, there is an alternative, and that's Socrates' solution. And your impulse about that is correct. But now we have to try to prove that. Because the counter-argument is going to be the happiness relativism argument. Well, being Catholic and going to confession and doing all these crazy religious things, that works for you. But for me, and list whatever insane, morally barbaric activity I want to do, and I say, who are you to judge me? And I pull out all the rage. But of course, that raises the question, is justice, is happiness, are these questions merely matters of opinion, which is what nearly everyone says in the United States as of what's 2023? Or are they matters of nature? Mm-hmm. Okay, Socrates is going to make the argument they're matters of nature. But then, of course, we have to establish this. And that's what Glaucon and Adeimantus want. They want an account of justice and happiness that makes this argument out. Okay, that defeats the hedonist. The hedonist is the person who thinks pleasure is the good, that pleasure is happiness. If that's the case, then happiness is just a feeling, and you might as well pursue a different way to getting it. And we should, frankly, all be drug addicts.
Mm-hmm. It seemed like the second part of her question was getting at the Kantian critique of this ontological account of morals, right? Where that somehow, if you feel good about doing the right thing, it's somehow tainted and undermines like the actual goodness of the
exactly.
act.
It's not for goodness sake, it's just for me feeling better.
I feel good about myself.
Right.
Yes. What I just prize as my highest value.
Yeah.
That's not a
But
question.
It almost seems like you're saying they can be the same thing.
Yes, that's where Socrates is going to go, and that is the solution to the Kantian. Do you know Kant's philosophy? This argument that if I get something for it, it somehow taints it, right? That kind of thing. So that Saint Mother Teresa, when she helped the poor, presumably she loved the poor. Mm-hmm. Oh well, I'm sorry, that's not good enough. Then she's getting something for it.
Right.
Right. But then the person who grudgingly gives, puts a few coins in the plate, that's true moral nobility because he hated to do it and he did it anyway. And you're like, seriously? That's the moral exemplar and St. Mother Teresa isn't? Right? So what Kant is doing in this argument is reducing morality just to the will. Mm-hmm. The will has to be spot on and leaving every other part of it out. But Socrates is talking about goodness for the whole human person, right? Which includes not just the will, but the intellect and the emotions and the desires, And remember, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all of yourself, not just your will. So there seems to be something where this idea that if you're doing the good and you might be able to exclude other factors. In fact, if you try to live a good life in this world, that will happen to you, right? And there are times when we might wonder, am I just doing it for the goodies? Then we read the book of Job and we're like, well, pretty obviously we can sort that out. But it doesn't mean the goodies aren't part of it. And that's a crucial question, which is, how are they intrinsically linked? So far, we've not seen any argument because Socrates, he's just beginning tonight. But here's the thing. We're going to see two phases of the argument. We're going to answer the argument on its own terms. Let's suppose the ring works and you can evade the notice of gods and men. Is justice still worth it? Books 2 to 4. End of book 4, Socrates is going to decisively prove absolutely it's worth it. But that's not the end of the story. And we're going to, when we get to books 8 through 10, Socrates is going to say, now I'm worried about something here. I'm worried we might have done an injustice to justice by not telling the full truth about her. Because she does have a reputation, not just with men, but also with gods. And now we're starting to move into that. Can we really get rid of the goodies? Are the goodies merely strung on accidentally, or is it intrinsic? Okay, so fantastic questions. And I have to give you a series of pointers and promissory notes to where we're going, but we still must give you the argument. Good. Yeah, really good question. Thank you for clarifying the Kantian one. Okay, so we saw last week that we were split about 1 to 3, 1 to 2, and all the people that pursued injustice and loved it, they've left. And all that we have left are you, the true martyrs, right? Just like Thrasymachus in book 1. Run away, baby. And we want to now see how Socrates is going to respond to this. So let's start where we left off last week in book 2. Whoa, my pages are really coming apart. No, 369b. Back to 368. Oh yeah, 368d. We were talking about this investigation to find out what justice is, what it truly is in itself, and this problem of it's very difficult to make it out in the soul, right? What is it? We're like, it's hard to say. And the soul seems to be a very, what is the soul? I mean, what is justice? What is the soul? It's very small, it's very hard to make out. But what if we found justice in a bigger place that was easier to recognize, easier to identify? And of course, we have justice in souls, but we also have justice in cities. Cities being bigger than souls, it would stand to reason that you would be able to see justice more easily in the cities. Then we would be able to go back and apply it to the soul. Understand the strategy? So we're making an enormous analogy from books 2 to 4 between the city and the soul, and finding justice in the one to illuminate the nature of justice in the other. And that is why then we're launching into this discussion of city building. Okay, everyone up to speed where we left off? All right, so we have to build a city in speech, and the first principle that Socrates identifies is, as you pointed out, well then, the bottom of that page, a city is, as I believe, it comes into being because each of us is not self-sufficiency, but is in need of much. Two key city building natural principles. The first of which is we lack self-sufficiency. We are in need of much. Now, if you contrast other kinds of creatures, let's take the cow. You're like, well, what are the cow's objectives? To make milk, to become beef, to make other cows, eat grass, and if he's got good horns, hopefully to take down a matador now and then, right? But that's it. And what are his equipment to achieve this end? Hooves, grass-munching teeth, multiple stomachs. I mean, everything about the cow is perfectly suited to those ends. You see that? But minimal equipment, minimal desires. Contrast that with the lion, right? The lion has enormous desires. He wants to eat wildebeests. strike down zebras. And look at his equipment. Huge, sharp claws, right? Amazing eyesight and hearing. The ability to feel vibrations. Enormous power and strength. A tail that gives him the balance. I mean, the lion is equipped for the objective. Now, the ultimate contrast is you. Look at you. Look at how pathetic you creatures are. You wear fur from other creatures. You don't have enough fur to cover your own bodies and make you warm. So you take it from leaves and plants. You take it from the belts of cows. Think about that. Borrowed furs. Look at your heads. Not exactly warm, very shiny. Dead giveaway for birds. Fire! Right? Not good. What about your claws? You're like, yeah, these are pathetic claws. What about your teeth? It's not going to work. Right? But what are our goals? What are our desires? Oh, well, we'd like to, get to the moon. Yeah. Dive deep into the oceans. Make amazing symphonies. In fact, we'd like to get to Mars. We have desires that far outweigh anything that we see in any other creature on Earth. And yet our capabilities are pathetic. We therefore are what? Lacking self-sufficiency and are in need of much. How do we offset this massive problem that we have in our physical systems? What do? We cooperate, right? We work together. So we immediately realize that human nature is built for community. We need one another. And then, of course, the whole situation changes, doesn't it? Because if we work together, then all of a sudden, we're top of the food chain. At this point, it's only those tiny little viruses that can get us. Any other animal, we can take it down. That's how extraordinary we are when we're together. Take one of you, right? What are those programs? Where they send you into the wilderness naked, or you have a one match or something? Right? No, you're like, I'm not signing up for that. That's crazy. Yeah, but see, when we're all together, right, and we bring sleeping bags and propane, we are good shape, okay? So, in community, we're able to make this work. Now, here's the question. Let's identify the things that we would think are most essentially needed for us to start a community. What are the core things we need? Food. And let's identify the person who produces it. So food is produced by a farmer. So in our city, we would need farmers, yes? Okay. What else do we need besides food? Shelters, right?
Shoes.
So people that build shelters are called carpenters. People that build shoes are called cobblers. And we don't carry our houses like turtles, right? So what else do we need? The turtle would not need.
Construction workers.
Remember? But you people really want to just... This whole fur thing still got you all mixed up. Okay, so weavers, right? All right, and let's think of this as the core we would need in our city. I'm drawing a circle around those 4 jobs. Now, if you were by yourself, you would still need to do all those things to survive, right? So, if we have our city, and we've got farmers and carpenters and cobblers and weavers, how should they go about doing what they do? Should the farmer spend 1/4 of his time farming, 1/4 carpentering, 1/4 cobblering, and 1/4 weaving? Or should the farmer spend 100% of his time farming, the carpenter 100% of his time carpentering, and vice versa? Which is a superior system? Specialization, division of labor, right? All very familiar to us. Socrates calls it the one man, one job principle. And of course, we use division of labor. Specialization. Now, why is that better? Okay, first of all, expertise. 3 reasons Socrates gives. If you do it all the time, you're going to be way better than if you do it only a fourth of the time. You're just going to get better and better and better. Every little thing you're going to notice, right? Okay? Expertise. What else?
Efficiency.
Yeah, efficiency. You're going to be able to produce a much greater amount of apples, houses, whatever it is we're building. Good? What else? Last reason.
We have different natures that are suited to different tasks.
Correct. We're differently gifted. Right? So you've heard about the person who has a green thumb. Every time they touch a plant, it grows. You're like, man, I get near a plant, it just dies. Right? Or you might be a chess player. Fantastic chess player. Someone else is like, oh, no way, I'm not getting near your chessboard. Right? Or a musician. Right? Some of you might be musicians. And others of you, you listen to the radio, you like music, but man, that's as far as it goes. Right? You kind of admire those people. You have appreciation. Right? But playing. So it seems like if we recognize that people have all different types of talents, it would stand to reason that their talents should link up with their jobs. Right? Because if we're all the same, we're going to lose our efficiency. So it follows, something pretty amazing is follows from this, which is equality is incompatible with excellence. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Equality is incompatible with excellence. When your heart is failing you and you want a surgeon, do you believe that everybody with MD is equal? No, you start asking people, who's the best? Right? You assume some doctors are better than others. An assumption which is very true. Just like some car mechanics are better than others. Just like some farmers are better than others. Look, in any given art, there's only one person who's the best. By contrast, there's only one person who's the worst. Everyone else is in between in a hierarchy. So there should be no problem with us being able to say, that person's better than I am. And thank God for that, because I wouldn't want to have to do surgery on my own heart. Right? We're all about elitism and specialization and high levels of capability when we have a need. But sometimes, other times, we get another mindset, which is, oh, this person must, think he's better than me. He is better than me. Mm-hmm. Well, that makes me feel bad about myself. Why? Why would you feel bad about yourself because you don't have the same gift as someone else? Why does everyone have to be on your level? Imagine if you made this principle civilization-wide. What would you do to your civilization if you took everyone and smushed them into a gray sludge right in the middle of mediocrity?
We have Harrison Berger on society.
Crushed society, right? The cure to the vice of envy. You know the difference between jealousy and envy, right? Jealousy, you want what the other guy has. Envy, you realize you're never going to get it, so you take him out. Remember Nancy Kerrigan? Skater. Very good skater. Championship American skater. Another skater, not so good. Tonya Harding. We feel the same bitterness about her name that we do to Benedict Arnold. Right? What did Tonya Harding do? Well, allegedly nothing at all. By some miracle, her boyfriend, with whom she had no communication, went and broke Nancy Kerrigan's leg 6 months before the Olympics. And suddenly, Nancy Kerrigan's out. Tonya Harding's in, right? Can't be better. Take them out. But Nancy Kerrigan came back. She fought her way back. And she skated in the Olympics and still beat Tonya Harding, but lost to Oksana Bayul by 1/10 of a point. A bitterness that apparently haunts her to this day because she knew that she would have won if she hadn't had her leg knocked down. Thus, think about what Tonya Harding's envy did. Okay? She cost the United States, her own country, a gold medal, and caused someone who should have been somebody she looked up to and been grateful for a serious injury and a life of difficulty. For what? Right? For what? It made no sense. So we cannot allow ourselves to fall into this idea of someone's better than me, I've got to undermine them. No, don't be that way. Realize, okay, that's fine. Of course there's people better than me. And there's people below me. That's just normal. And be grateful. The way to have the cure for this is to be thankful. Be thankful for all the different capabilities, all the different excellences, and then this will work. But if we allow envy to infect us, we will destroy the thing that makes our civilization great. So, outstanding work, excellence, one-man, one job only works when we're grateful for each other's talents. So, our city must, of a minimal level, have at least these 4 jobs. However, we need things for these guys to work. As somebody, I think, Michael, you already suggested one thing. Like the carpenter. What do carpenters work with? Wood. And yeah, we got to have somebody get some trees. Do we really think the carpenter should be out chopping the trees down? You're like, well, doesn't that sound kind of like a different job, a different art? Yes, different, right? So we need some lumberjacks. And of course, you mentioned tools. All of these people are going to need tools. So what kind of a person makes tools? A smith, right? And our weavers, what are they weaving out of?
Wool, flax.
Right. Different kinds of things farmers grow, or shepherds. So we may need different kinds of farmers, or we're going to need some shepherds. You see what's going on here? A second circle that provide the things that these people need to do their jobs. But of course, these people out here in Ring 2, they still need food and carpentering and shoes and clothes. So I want you to think of this circles, 2 circles, as 3-dimensional. This one's growing larger to meet those needs. Everyone follow? But of course, that doesn't solve the problem. Because the smiths are working with what to do their smithing? Where's the metal coming from? Oh, so now we need mines. Like, oh yeah, we do need mines. All right, you see the problem? So we would have a bunch of layers like this of the different groups that need what they need. And our city, therefore, is going to start to expand. Now, there's a problem, of course. So, one is Allie. The other is Liz. So, Allie and Liz. For some reason, who of you are better up in trees?
We're both afraid of heights. I'll say all.
All right. Allie's a lumberjack. You're going to be an apple grower.
Okay.
You like apples?
Yeah.
Pick the right one. Okay. So, you guys make a deal because you need some wood. All right? And she's hungry. She loves your apples. Even you suggest I could make a few pies. So she's like, oh, I'm in. So that's what you do. And in the morning, you come into town and you have a huge bushel, cart full of apples, and you're hoping she's going to be there. The problem is, right, Allie does not like to work in the heat of the day. So she goes out early and climbs trees and starts chopping wood to avoid the heat. And you're sitting there, boy, this is taking forever. When is she going to come in? And you're starting to get nervous because you know your trees. You know the insects that try to get at them. And she's like, I got to get back to my trees. This is crazy. So finally, after 3 or 4 hours go by, no Allie showing up. What does Liz do? She says, that's it. She plunks the apples in the ground and heads back to the farm. About 2, 3, 4 o'clock, right? Allie comes in with the wood. And she's like, what? Where's the trade? What happened to Liz? And then she sees the apples. She thinks, oh, she just left them for me. Perfect. But the apples have been sitting in the sun. And what happens to apples that have been sitting around? Not good. You do not like what you're seeing. Right? So we have a problem here. You see that? All of our different arts are not on the same schedule. So what do we need to enable us to get around this problem, which is obviously going to happen with all the different arts or jobs, right? Notice I'm using the word art, not just for like painting, but art is any human activity, okay? So what do we need?
Order.
Commerce.
Shopkeeper.
Shopkeeper, yeah, merchant, shopkeeper, something like that. See how this works? Now we have an economy. And of course, the shopkeeper can keep the apples in the refrigerator. He can put the wood above the ground so it's not sitting in the water. Prolongs the value. And of course, eventually we think of the idea of money, right? And money is a placeholder for value that never perishes. When it's, back in the day it was made out of a gold coin. Well, that's good to go. So that's how these things tend to come into being. Of course, on the other hand, we've also probably got ourselves a little bit too good to be true situation, because we're assuming that our land, wherever we planted our city, has perfect land for farming, amazing trees for cutting down and building things, fields for all of our cattle, right? Mining areas, mountains for to get all this iron ore and gold and silver out of. I mean, what are the odds of that? So what's more likely to be the case? We're going to have some of those, but not others, and therefore, what are we going to need? Another city?
Trade.
Or trade with other cities. So now, shopkeeping, internal trade, yeah? Now we're talking about external trade. And therefore, we have another entire circle, and then all the things necessary for that. You might do caravans if you're landlocked, or you might do ships, but then, of course, you're going to need all the things for that. Pilots, sailors, the whole shipbuilding industry, and then all these other ones keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is how cities grow, isn't it? And they develop more art, more specializations, and they become more efficient, and they become greater. Okay? So that's how they talk about the building of this city. So let's see how Socrates says it's going to work. Take a look over at 372a. Bottom of page 48, do we all have exactly the same pagination? Yeah, okay. Then our city has already grown to completeness, right, Adamantus? Top of the next page, page 49, 371e. Perhaps. Where in it then would justice and injustice be? Along with which of the things we considered did they come into being? Right? We should now be able to find justice, and our inquiry should be concluded, 2 pages in. The rest of the book is probably just stuff they printed for whatever reason. Well, I can't think, Socrates, he said, unless it's somewhere in some need these men have for one another. Perhaps what you say is fine, I said. Remember, Socrates is the narrator. It really must be considered, and we mustn't back away. First, let's consider what manner of life men so provided for will lead. Won't they make bread, wine, clothing, and shoes? And when they have built houses, they will work in the summer, for the most part naked and without shoes, and in the winter adequately clothed and shod. For food, they will prepare barley meal and wheat flour. They will cook it and eat it. Setting out noble leaves of barley and wheat on some reeds or clean leaves, they will stretch out on rushes strewn with yew and myrtle, and feast themselves and their children. Afterwards they will drink wine, and crowned with wreaths sing of the gods. So they will have sweet intercourse with one another, and not produce children beyond their means, keeping an eye out against poverty or war. And Glaucon interrupts, saying, you seem to make these men have their feast without relishes. All right, what is relish?
Extra.
It's the extra, the condiment, the little extra you put in the burger or the hot dog, right? Ah, Socrates, what you say is true. I forgot. They'll have relishes. It's plain they'll have salt, olive cheese, they'll boil onions and greens, just as one gets them out in the country. To be sure, we'll set desserts before them, figs, pulse, and beans. They'll roast myrtle berries and acorns before the fire, and drink in measure along with it. And so they will live out their lives in peace, with health, as is likely. And at last, dying as old men, they will hand down other similar lives to their offspring. And he said, Glaucon that is, if you were providing for a city of sows, Socrates, on what else would you fatten them than this? Glaucon is angry. He's saying, you're making a city fit for pigs, not human beings. And Socrates says, well, how should it be, Glaucon? As is conventional, he said. I suppose men who aren't going to be wretched recline on couches, not reeds, right? Eat from tables, notice there was no furniture in this city, and have relishes and desserts just like men have nowadays. All right, I said, I understand. We are, as it seems, considering not only how a city, but also a luxurious city comes into being. Perhaps that's not bad either, for in considering such a city too, we could probably see in what way justice and injustice naturally grow in cities. Now, the true city is, in my opinion, the one we just described, a healthy city, as it were. But if you want to, let's look at a feverish city too. Nothing stands in the way. For these things, as it seems, won't satisfy some, or this way of life, but couches, tables, and other furniture will be added, and of course relishes, perfume, incense, courtesans, and cakes, all sorts of them. And in particular, we can't still postulate the mere necessities we were talking about at first, houses, clothes, and shoes, but painting and embroidery must also be set in motion. Gold, ivory, and everything of the sort must be obtained. Isn't that so? Yes, he said. Okay. So that's the kind of city we want, right?
He's equating a luxurious city with a feverish city.
Correct. And that has extraordinary implications for this book. The Republic, the name of the book, is which city? The original city, the healthy city, or the feverish city? The feverish city. So, question, is what Plato is doing in this book through Socrates, is Socrates giving us a political treatise on the best form of government? No. This is not a political book. This is an ethics book. The point of the city building is to see how justice and injustice naturally arise in cities so that we can identify their natures and then apply it to the soul. Many people interpret the Republic as though this is a serious proposal for how we should do things. And there are lots of interesting principles. But there's a major problem that comes up, and we'll run into it probably tonight. And it's so serious, Glaucon and Adeimantus challenge Socrates in book 5, and they take all of books 5, 6, and 7 to deal with it. Okay, and we'll talk about this and what it really means. But the first thing to understand is not to misunderstand this book. Do not misinterpret it. If you've ever seen like programs on TV or PBS, everyone misinterprets the Republic. They take it all seriously, like this is completely, definitely what Socrates is saying is the best city. Yet he just told us it's feverish. So keep that in mind as we go through this. All right. So we apparently need lots of other things for our city. So what do you want in your city? Let's add one last ring, and let's put it in there.
Need a vineyard.
Okay? If we're going to have wine, we need vineyards. What else? This is your chance. What do you want? Pastries. Good.
We certainly need brewers.
There you go. Brewers. We're going to have wineries, right?
Foxconn iPhone factory.
Say that one more time.
iPhone factory.
Ah, yes, Apple. I said, what do you want? I didn't put limits on the tech, right? What else?
Diamond sellers.
There you go. Jewelers, right?
Amusement park.
Yes, amusements,
Pets.
movies, pets. All right, we can fill it up. All right, and now we've got a city that we would recognize, that you would probably want to live in rather than, living on mats of straw. And we have all these people necessary to make this work. Remember, three-dimensional sticking out. Socrates calls these people the wealth makers, or we might call them the first group of people. We're using the term class. Do not associate the term class here with anything Marxist. We're using this entirely neutrally, just as a group of people. Okay? So by classes, the first classes are producers, right? And these people are producing everything necessary for the city to function. Now, everything would be well and good if we could find justice in this, except Socrates realizes a problem. And perhaps you can see it too, right? What is this? Ever seen this shape before? What does this look like to you?
Target.
Yes, it does, right? If you're a bowman, you're like, I've been thinking I'm going to shoot some arrows at that thing. The problem is, our area cities and the piratic types and the hill peoples, they're also looking at our city thinking, I do like pastries. Right? And they're going to start firing arrows. So by making a very luxurious cities, we have put our target on ourselves, and now we have a problem. How in the world are we going to protect ourselves?
An army.
All right, we apparently need some sorts of troops or something, which Socrates calls our guardians. All right, and the question is, what kind of people are they? You say, what do you mean by that? Well, we have two possible sources. let's go back to our founding. The Minutemen, remember? Ring the bell. They race out in the green from dropping their spades and pick up their musket, and they go. They were called the militia. Remember the old militias back in the Revolutionary War days? All right, so that's one approach. Other approach, totally professional standing army, right? So we could go either way. So which way should we go and why? Professional army?
Yes,
Why?
because it goes along with the principle that everybody wants one job.
All right, our one man, one job principle would strongly suggest that we go for professional military. But we're Americans, are we not? Remember our history. Remember Thomas Jefferson? Very concerned about this. Why? Professional armies have an unfortunate tendency to take over. Right? One time, down in Rhegium in the boot of Italy, this is early in the Republic of Rome, one of Rome's allies was under attack by pirates. There's always pirates down there near Sicily. And they're like, hey, could you send us some help? So the Romans like, yeah, absolutely. So they sent a legion down there, and they thrashed the pirates. No, easy, right? Easy for a legion. But then the legion's like, and they took over Rhegium. So the Rhegium citizens sent another letter to the Senate. What's going on? Right? We asked for help, not a takeover. The Romans were appalled, and they sent a couple of legions down there to thrash the first legion. They captured about 300 of them. The rest were killed in the battle, and they brought them back to Rome. They scourged them, and then they executed the lot. Okay? This is the problem. Standing armies are a danger to the citizenry. Is this not true? Right, when the Navy comes in, how many of you want your daughters down there at the dock? They're like, yeah, rough people, dangerous people, right? So that's a problem. Thomas Jefferson was so concerned about this, he massively reduced the army once he became president. Okay, when he came into the presidency, there were 3,000 men in the United States Army. He's like, this is dangerous. He immediately reduced it to 2,500. We've got to get this under control. Okay?
But then they burned down the Capitol. Years later.
That's right. The British. And after that, what did the Americans build?
Standing army.
At West Point, they built a military academy to create a professional army. Exactly right. So that's the issue. Okay? And don't have romantic notions about militia. Okay? George Washington hated the militia. I've read all his letters, love this guy, but despised militia. Why? Number one, they demanded double pay. You imagine that? Every night they went home to wifey. Soft living. Doesn't sound like a tough soldier, does it? If they go home every night, how do you have an army you can maneuver with? Every time he went to a new area, he got a whole new army if he was lucky. He wanted a continental army. You've heard of the continental soldier, right? And that means they can travel anywhere on the continent. So, professional army all the way for Washington. It was so bad, he had to get that Prussian, remember Count von Steuben, to come in and whip them into shape. The first thing von Steuben said is, you need to start shooting people. If you don't, you're never going to instill discipline. And that's what Washington started to do. And guess what? The army started to look like a real army. Okay. And the other final problem with militia is, what do they do during a battle? Always run away. What would you do? There's all these British regulars, right? They can shoot 3 to 4 times a minute. You're lucky if you can put 1 or 2 rounds downrange at that point. And it's just a machine gun. Multiple first-rank fire, second-rank fire, third-rank fire. You're like, get me out of here.
I'm a farmer. This
Right?
is a mistake.
Two blasts by the British, and the militia ran away every time. So Washington is like, this is not going to work. The only way to defeat the British is to stand toe-to-toe with them and outshoot them. And that's why Washington lost almost all his battles. He was not the best general, okay? It's a long, complicated story. But what it goes to show us is this. Our guardians must be pros. They have to be pros. But then, if they're going to be professionals, how are we going to get them to be professionals in such a way that they're not threatening to us? We have to solve the standing army problem. We need them to be vicious toward enemies, but friendly at home. If only we had an image of some creature that had those qualities. Well, that's a good point. The dog knows the enemy, the mailman, every time attack, right? And yet with your little 30-year-old daughter, friendly and wonderful. So what you're saying, if I understand, Ty, is that if we could turn men into dogs, we can make them effective soldiers. For the record, Ty is nodding at this point. That's exactly what Socrates thinks. And every other military in history agrees.
What's the mascot of the Marines?
Which one?
Bulldogs.
The bulldog. Yeah. And what's the principle of the Marines? Every man is first and foremost a rifleman. Okay? Everyone's a rifleman, first and foremost. This is why they survived Guadalcanal. Japanese broke through their lines, right? And the Japanese thought, this is it, we got them now. Typists, officers, chefs, wounded soldiers, doctors. This is going to be a cakewalk. This wasn't the United States Army. This was the Marine Corps. You're like, yeah, but the Navy had run away. You're right, the Navy had run away. Japanese ships chased the Navy off. Do you think that changed anything for the Marines? No. Every single one of them picked up a rifle and they beat the pants off the Japanese. Japanese were stunned that the back lines were full of fighters. Right? So we need to train our people in some way that can effect this vicious toward enemy, friendly toward home spirit. And all of our militaries do this. So what is the first art that Socrates recommends to train our guardians? First of three. That's the second. Music. We'll get to that. Gymnastics. Now think of that as what we would now view as athletics. Athletics. And I want you to think about this. Would Socrates think it's a good idea for us to train them in Olympic level javelin throwing?
Oh, sure. For javelin throwing.
Would that be good for us? What's the problem with having Olympic level javelin throwing for our troops?
It would exhaust them.
And that's how many other things do they know how to do? Nothing. It's over-specialized. See the Marine motto? Riflemen, everyone has to be able to fight and do everything. What happens to our army if we're in a big, thick forest, like those German forests? What happens to our javelin throwers then? They're going to get slaughtered, right? So we need well-trained, able to do it all. And general gymnastic, general athletics, not super specializations. Everyone understand? Now, think about what athletics does to you. How does that help train soldiers?
Physical.
Okay, so clearly there's a physical component, right? Discipline.
Aggression.
There is. You have to want it and you have to take it. Yep, and what else? Another huge thing that comes out of athletics.
Teamwork.
The only way you win is if you work as a team, right? The individual is subjugated for the sake of the team. And the team survives, wins, in war, survives, only if you fight as a team. So it's very interesting. And athletics, all ancient athletics was all preparation for war, right? You probably know your history, you know that. So we have all these things, and notice they develop both the mind and the body. Both are being developed by gymnastics, not just one thing. All right, but secondly, why music? That seems strange. No idea. Why? I mean, what do we want? The Beatles? Give them M16s and send them into Vietnam, see how it goes? No, it's not going to work, right? So what's he doing here? What's he talking about?
Learn, like, refinement in those things. That's supposed to soften the soul. You know?
I'll give you some evidence. Any of you ever watched the Bugs Bunny show? All right. You know how there's this creature from Tasmania that gets involved sometimes, the Tasmanian devil? All right. Very mean, very vicious. I noticed something that Bugs did when Tasmanian devil came around. He whipped out a violin and began to play. And what did the Tasmanian devil do? This is proof. If it's on Bugs Bunny, it must be real. All right? Music calms the wild beasts, right? But it doesn't just calm. Consider. Any of you ever been around weightlifters or been weightlifters yourself? Right? You go into the weight room. They often have music playing. Let's see. Celine Dion, right?
No.
What? No?
Sometimes at the road gym.
Basically, yeah, it's just top 40s pop music.
Okay.
It's a pressure.
Most of the places that I've been that are weightlifting places, we're not playing Celine Dion. What do they play? Heavy metal music. Why? Get you pumped up. Right? You want to lift, you want to... It brings it out. So their music is bringing out aggression and power. If you think about it, music can bring out a lot of things in people. Mull this over carefully. Morally, this could have great benefits for us. We'll see this later when we talk about the virtues and how these elements play into this. Music has always been a part of our militaries, even now. We have these guys out there marching around to music. The drum, the trumpet, and of course the fife in the American tradition, right? And the discipline of marching, working together as a team. Back in the day, this mattered for actual battlefield formations. Now nobody in the right mind would do this, and we still have them march to music. So, music, imagery, rallies the soul. You see where we're going with this? I don't want you to think of this just as music like tunes. Think of the lyrics. Think of great plays. Right? Plays that say to soldiers who stick it out to the end that even if they die, their children are taken care of and the gods reward them when they get home. Okay? We want these people to fight. We want to degrade the enemy in their imagination so they will be able to fight. I once heard a civilian, I was a civilian teacher at West Point, okay? There was about 18% of us, that's it. Congress mandated it, they put up with it. You know, it worked more or less. But I remember once there was a civilian at a conference, and she made a comment like, well, I want every soldier when he looks down his rifle in his sights to think, that's a daddy just like me. And I thought, oh man. Of frontline infantry units in World War II, frontline infantry, not cooks, 9 out of 10 never fired their weapon. Why? Because killing is tremendously difficult to do. And we need these people to kill. So we have to bend reality for them. We're going to tell them things, right? Tell them things to enable them to fight. The enemy are vermin. You say, yeah, why do we always degrade the enemy in war? Do you want to fight them or not? You don't have to believe it if you're on the home front, but you better hope that they believe it in the war. And by the way, the enemy's doing the same thing to you. Okay? This is the nature of war. Remember, you wanted a luxurious city. This is what you pay, right? This is what you pay. And so, art and great speeches. Remember Thomas Paine wrote that Common Sense tract and talked about these are the days, the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier runs away, right? These people were in torment at Valley Forge, and yet with this great speech, he rallied them. That's what happens. Music, rhetoric, great speeches. Remember, I remember one time orientation at West Point, all right? It's just endlessly boring, wonderful stuff. Boring, boring, boring. And then we had this speech by a Marine colonel. And he started telling stories. Now, we understand, this is almost all Army officers, you know, lieutenants, captains, a few civilians like me. And as we came out of there, all we wanted to do was find something to bayonet. I mean, we were revved up to kill things. Like Henry V, remember the great St. Crispin's Day speech? You are the ones that were here. You're going to make all other men wish they had been here with Harry today to kill the French. That's what that Marine colonel made us feel. And when I walked out of there, I was like, how did he do that? That's the spirit I'm talking about. That rallies and moves people, all right? music, rhetoric, imagery, drama. We are not going to show our soldiers born on the 4th of July. You remember this movie? When you go to war, you'll probably become a paraplegic. And you'll be stuck around in a wheelchair, right? Yeah, that's going to really motivate our soldiers. Question, do people in wars end up paraplegics?
Yes.
Absolutely. And on the civilian front, it is a horror. But we do not show that to our soldiers, do we? No, we show them Top Gun and then Maverick when it comes out, and it's just as great, right? That's what we show them, heroism. And so we have to move them and bend them. Bend their nature. That's what we do to our soldiers. Last of the 3 arts. What's the third?
Story.
Well, that's in the music. Yes, that's... See, I'm using music broadly. All of those theatrical art elements.
Music was the most confusing point.
Probably because you thought of it as music only. But notice that music moves both mind and body as well.
Religion, the spiritual side.
Oh, no.
Oh, two.
I mean, the gods are involved. Remember, we're pagan at this point. We have to... We can jump to Christianity from time to time if we need to.
I was talking about how do we present the gods, but I'm probably too far.
Oh, no. You're absolutely right. We present the gods according to what our soldiers need.
Yeah.
You say, but that sounds like you're bending the truth, and it sounds like you're censoring what they get to watch if they don't get to watch Born on the 4th of July. And it sounds like you're trying to control. Absolutely correct. Obviously. How could you do it otherwise?
Like we're doing now.
And it's how well it works, right? No, so Socrates is quite serious about this. People say, well, Plato, he advocates censorship. Yeah, he does. For soldiers. Reading the book helps interpret it. It's amazing. Okay? All right. So it also should make us think. Our troops are a different kettle of fish. And there's a lot to think about in this. We'll talk more as we go. Third art. What's the third one?
Out of professional consideration, you recommended philosophy.
Seriously?
Well, no, that's one of the, that's how I read it.
I read it too. Well done. I just want to see if you're going to stick to your guns like a soldier or run away. You held fast. Well done. A for the day, Michael.
You know which side his bread is buttered on.
Philosophy. Why philosophy? You'd be like, philosophy? Give me a break. Every West Point cadet had to take philosophy. After the My Lai massacre on the Army, right? They were like, this can't happen again. So ethics, for sure, right? Obviously. But not just ethics. Philosophy teaches you to distinguish between appearance and reality. Way it seems, but what is it really? Think that's important in war? You must not fall for enemy tricks. And you must be able to set up your enemy with tricks. War is all about subterfuge and trickery. So philosophy is an art which will help them be able to cling to reality. So these 3 arts, Socrates thinks, put together, will train and bend human nature. Okay, to make them have things in common. Oh, that's the 4th principle. Well, that's 3 arts and then a key principle. All things in common. Another way of it is saying no money, no gold. We want these soldiers to be fighting not for an apple orchard in their family plot, or that bank over there, or their family. What if their family's on the back wall, and our generals are convinced the enemy's coming from the front, and then a rumor starts, as they always do, it's a feint. The enemy's really going to attack from the rear. And your family's house is in the rear wall. What are you going to want to do?
Go back.
Right? Sneak away. So maybe it'd be better if our soldiers not have families. Do you know in the Roman legions, you first enlisted for 16 years and then Augustus moved it to 20? They were not allowed to be married the whole time? They were wedded to the legion. Okay? But then afterwards, they were taken care of. After they came in as a legion, they fought as a legion for 20 years, and then when they retired as a legion, and they were given plots of land all together in one place, and they became a Roman military colony. They were able to stay together with their brothers in arms. Very important. We don't do anything like this, but the psychology of war could be greatly helped if they were continued to be able to be kept as a unit. We want them to think in common. And all armies do this, right? When you go in, what do they do to you for day one? Are any of you veterans? All right, you have brothers and sisters, uncles and aunts, fathers, grandpas they probably told you the stories, right? What do they do when you go into what do they do? They shave your head. They take all your hair first thing. What does that do to you?
Makes you look all the same.
It makes you look all the same, replacing individuality with
Uniform.
group thinking. Uniform, we all have the same clothes. We all use the same shoes, right? Different sizes, but that's as far as it goes. Same socks, same pants, same bed, same guns. Same. There is no more socialistic institution in the United States than the military. And that is as it must be. Why? Right? We've got to get them to be the same so they will function as a machine of war, right? So, you think of Nero as a terrible bad guy, and I can see why. But up in Britain, things were not going well. In fact, that's when the Boudica revolt happened. Okay? And she rallied 200, I'm not saying she didn't have her reasons, but she rallied tens of thousands of Celts to the point where they hit Corfinium, they hit Londinium, and they were going to take out all three of the major Roman cities. They burned two of them to the ground. Things were going very bad. And she had, by that point, everyone joined. There were 250,000, 80 to 250,000 troops marching all the way to the west where General Paulinus was with his legion. One legion, the 14th, and some auxiliaries, maybe, 10 to 14,000 men total. Not good, right? And they get there, and he picks the ground. He kept retreating. And finally he gets to a place where there's trees and mountains over here, and then a plain. And he says, this is where we're going to make our stand. His men were scared. Romans were always scared of Britons because, one, they painted themselves blue and fought naked. This is tough to deal with. And then it was very superstitious. Britain is very mysterious and weird. To this day, those forests, it's odd, right? And they were scared. And Paulinus looked at his men, and he knew they were scared. And so he went out in front of them. He berated them. Seriously. You Roman legionaries who have fought and just wiped out the Druids, who've been the cause of all this problem, dang Druids, he took out the whole island, killed them all. If you ever hear about Druids today, they're not the real ones. Paulinus took them out, okay? Gone, kaput. He says, now a woman comes and you're afraid of a woman? What kind of men are you? You say, that sounds like sexist talk, like he's demeaning women and trying to make them feel good about their masculinity. Yes, of course. Right? And they're like, yeah, that's right. We're legionaries. And we're going to be all dead if we don't fight and stand. They knew that too. All right? And so the Celts came. Down they came. And Paulinus organized his men in a very strange formation. Normally they would have multiple lines. Well, he didn't have enough guys for very many multiple lines. So he set them into wedges like this. The wedge formation. And he had his cavalry on his flanks over here and here. Very few cavalry, maybe 300 or 400, not good. And there's the mountains and everything. But look at the formation he chose. And so down the Celts came with their war chariots. They always put the war chariots out front. And they loosed their first set of javelins. Roman legionaries carried 2 or 3 javelins typically. All right, loose, they all fly out, tangled mess of all the horses and men, right? And then loose the second, same thing, knocked them all down. Loose the third, same thing, knocked them all down, form up into their wedges, draw their swords. And then, what does Paulinus do? He sounds the charge, advance, not charge, advance. And so this formation starts to advance. Now remember, there's all these charioteers and horses and men cut, and there's 250,000 people back here pushing forward, totally unaware of what's happening up here. And all their wives, they formed a big wagon. They had wagons filled with war booty from all the other places they knocked off. All right? And they're all back here cheering them on. Get up there. Come on. Get those Romans. And this becomes like a lawnmower of death. See? Swords from this side, swords from this side, swords, right? You see? Like, and the Romans are just a machine of death with their armor and their discipline and their chopping. And they just cut right through those Celts. Destroyed them. 14,000 Romans. 80 to 250,000 Celts. No one knows the actual number. And saved Britain from the Celts for 400 years. Greatest victory in Roman history. Why? The machine of war. If those guys had tried to be individuals, would it have worked? No. Okay? This is how war works. But you and I, come on. Right? If they said, quick, grab your muskets. Let's go fight whoever's attacking Columbus. Right? We'd be terrified. Now, some of you might have some experience of this or that. And some of you might be like, well, I'd be tougher. Well, we'd see. Right? But here's the key. Ready? This is not natural. It's not natural. Getting people to learn how to fight and kill, not natural. So we need to break them of that model and switch to everything in common. Same houses, same ranks, okay? No families, forget about it. Everything in common, all the wives in common. Now notice, Plato has both female and male guardians. He's convinced that the sexes are real, contrary to current public opinion, and that we need both in the war. Because males and females contribute different things, and we want every possible art, and we want to get all those skills. So his idea, Socrates' idea, says, look, why don't we do this? Why don't we say whoever fights the best in the battle, male and female, we're going to mate them. Then second most great female fighter, they'll mate. On down. And what we're going to get out of this is the next generation of even better warriors. Right? You say, doesn't this eugenics or something? Of course it's eugenics. Brilliant. Right?
Soviet Union's of the
Right?
day.
Now, lest you be concerned, wait a minute. Aren't the mothers going to want to stay with their babies? We got it covered. What we're going to do is take the babies, all right, as soon as they give birth, take the babies and put them in the guardian nursery and mix them all up. And send them back to the war. They'll be back with their brothers and soldiers, sisters in arms. It'll be great. Shouldn't be a problem. Should work, right? Now, I told you there was going to be objection in book 5. You starting to figure out what the objection is? Seriously? They say, wait a minute, Socrates, aren't we going to end up with massive incest in this system? So Socrates says, not a problem. What we're going to do is this. And he gives this highly complicated mathematical system to sort this out. And it doesn't work. No one thinks seriously this works. Now, what's going on here? What do you think's really going on? A system that clearly doesn't work. Socrates knows this. But what are we supposed to learn?
That humans have to be instrumentalized for war.
Yes, and
You can't break down the family unit.
it doesn't work because of these problems, which are maybe not problems. Look, there's a question of whether war is really an art at all. What does it produce? Death, violence, and destruction. And when we do this to people, bend them. And we also break them. And all the tricks that we tell them, right? To try to rally them and producer, give you a big cash prize. Right? Guardian, he doesn't care about money. Why? I'll tell you why. Andrew, you're a guardian. You have gold in your soul. He's like, yeah, that's right. Now, these two, apples and trees, they're like, oh, brother. For a ribbon and a piece of gold, give me a break. Right? And he's like, they know nothing about honor. And they're both.
Gold supremacists?
Yes, it does. And here's the thing. Ready? They're both right. They're both right. Because producers produce for the sake of wealth and property. And soldiers fight for honor and for their country. We want the maximum private-mindedness of our different growers and tree people and everything else. And we want the maximum public-mindedness in our guardians. So their house is the city. Their wealth is the city's wealth. They never have to worry about when they get out that there's no veterans hospital to actually help them, that there's no Roman colony where they get to be put. They have to have total confidence that we will watch out for them. You understand the idea? That's what Socrates is talking about. And we're going to start very early in our program to figure out who is who. 5 years old. Line up everybody, all the kids. Big fire over here. All right. Johnny, leap over the fire. So he runs up there and starts to cry. Producing class. I think producer. Next kid, Henry, races the fire with a battle cry, a war cry. Ah! Leaps over the fire, barely singed. Guardian, definitely. Okay. Tests. Third guy, Charles. I shouldn't have used that. We just have a king now. And not we, the British, our former enemies, have a king. Charles races to the fire, trips and falls in. I know what you're concerned, but Darwin at work. No, he's done everyone a favor. His family will ultimately appreciate this. All right, so we're going to test and we're going to rigorously sort them out so we get the best possible warriors. But the only way this works is if we bend human nature. And that should give you pause and make you think about war and what war does, what we are doing to our warriors. Okay, what we are doing to our warriors. But the All Things in Common clearly has major problems. And that's what stops them for 3 books as they try to deal with this. All right, now, it looks to me like we have producers who obey the laws, guardians who enforce the laws, but we have no one to make the laws. So we need a third class, do we not? We need some rulers, do you agree? Now, Socrates starts to call the guardians at this point the guardian auxiliaries, and the rulers, he calls them the true guardians. And so now we have a problem. Where are these people going to come from? You're like, what do you mean? Well, they are either going to come from the producing class or the guardian auxiliaries. So, what's the better plan?
Guardians, because they're the noble-souled ones who have the collective in mind.
All right. That does make some sense, right? That our guardian auxiliaries have been trained their whole life to think for the good of the whole. Those Apple people over there, every government issue is, how is this going to affect the price of apples? I don't know. Right? And he's like, apple pie, pear pie, peach pie, like them all. Right? So there's something about the ruler that if he were to come out of our guardian classes, we would tend to expect that commonality. What else? Let me give you a little thing you might have noticed. Socrates calls the rulers what? Philosopher, kings. Yeah, I see the smirks.
If you flaunt their job.
I see what's going on here. You're like, oh yeah, of course. Of course. You waited till this point in the story. It's been good. We're on the edge of our seats, right? And then you say, of course the philosopher should be ruling us all. And you're a philosopher. Socrates is a philosopher. This book is ridiculous, right? Well, ask yourself this. Is Socrates talking about academic philosophers in ivory towers who have no sense of reality whatsoever? No. Right? How many ivory tower professors did you ever hear of who served 30 years, served their country? How many? Not a lot, right? Do you know there was this Roman, young, not really high-level aristocrat. He was aristocratic, senatorial rank, but still pretty low in the totem pole, named Marius. And he decided he was going to stand for consul for the election. They have 2 consuls like our president. And the people, he goes to the rostrum, which is in the Forum, place where Mark Antony gave the famous speech, you know. And he says, I want you to vote for me for consul. And the people are like, Marius, why should we vote for you? And Marius says, you want to know why you should vote for me? And he grabbed his tunic and he ripped it back. No, not one of those types of people. Ripped it back and he says, because all my wounds are on the front. All my wounds are on the front. He got elected consul. Right? That makes a difference, doesn't it? If I was trying to run for consul, become a philosopher king, you would say, well, show us where, which battlefield in Ohio, Dr. Thiel, your blood was poured out for this state. Because a person who puts his life on the line has demonstrated a genuine commitment for something more than himself. Right? It's very interesting. And we've had some mediocre presidents who came from generals. But our first one, General Washington, very noble, right? And you see a certain spiritedness that comes through that. And so there is something to that. What's more, somebody who's led an army as a general, if you've ever seen a military base, it's a city. Right? They know how to organize. They know logistics. They know how to get things done. Right? So all of that skill is contained in those kinds of people. And so it kind of makes sense to tap them. But here's the problem. They're not going to want to do it. They've served 30 years. They're wanting to go to the colony, thank you very much. They're tired, exhausted, right? And then you say, well, I'm sorry, we're going to need you to serve as a ruler for 5 years. You say, why wouldn't they be tempted by that? Because they know what power is for. All power is given for the sake of those under it. All power is given for the sake of those under it. Political power, this is what it really is. Endlessly having to put your nose into other people's problems to help you figure them out with no benefit to yourself. That is authentic political power. These people have been doing this all their life. They're tired. Can they just retire? It said in the contract, retire at 30 years. And now you're saying we have to do this? What are you going to do if we don't? Socrates says we'll put him in prison. That's how reluctant he expects them to be. And at that point, they'll remember their duty. Like, fine. And they'll serve without ambition and without lust for power and without the craving for cash. And so they're trustworthy. Now, contrast that with the American model. Do you remember the problem of ambition? How many of you read the Federalist Papers? Right? 1 or 2? Ooh, 4. Wow, that's amazing. Federalist Papers. In there, Hamilton talks about the problem of ambition. What's his solution?
Let it work against each other.
Let it work against each other, right? So if Julia comes in with a lot of ambition and Ty has a lot of ambition and they go against each other and Julia beats Ty, well, it neutralized. Whew, we don't have to worry, right? And isn't that been the way it's worked? Michael then decides to run against Julia. But to beat her, he needs what? More ambition, right? More bloodthirsty. More willingness to bend rules and sneak around them. And then he beats Julia. But then Andrew comes along wearing the Godfather shirt. You want to show them the Godfather shirt? And Michael's like, dang. Right? Now we're going to see the meaning of power. Right. So it's not clear that rival ambition works. Now, you may be dubious if we tried to practically put Socrates' system into effect, right? Because as soon as everyone knows the game, pretend you don't want to rule, and then have all your friends put your name forward. Right? That would get around very quickly. But still, they'd have to be people that have proven themselves in war and shown themselves worthy of sacrifice. So, there might be some value here. All right. And at that point, it would appear that we have our 3 classes in our city. So, we were supposed to be interested in justice. So let's jump over to that question, or almost that question.
This is unrelated to the text, more or less, but why do you think there's no priestly class? Everywhere else seems to have these 3 basic classes, but there's also a 4th priestly class.
Yeah, that's a really good question. the gods have a role throughout the entire thing. And the notion of piety starts as the duty one owes one's father. And then it evolves into the duty one owes the city leaders and the duty one owes the gods. Piety as a familial, civil, and religious thing become one and the same. So in these ancient pagan systems, all religion was civil religion. Julius Caesar had the high priestly office of Pontifex Maximus. That's where we get it from the Pope, you understand, right? He was a priest. Every time the Roman legions began, they had the lustration ceremony where the priest would come. They had priests involved with everything. So it's not like, so the priests are just built right into the system. And the way he talks about the gods, it doesn't seem like he's trying to make a distinction. I don't think Socrates is thinking about the priesthood class the way they were in Egypt, where they were a force in and of themselves that literally overthrew pharaohs and pushed pharaohs around. It's not clear to me from Roman or Greek history that you see much of that. And then, of course, it's a good question as to why. And I would imagine we'd get the standard Greek and Roman answer, which is, well, that's because we're not slaves. Okay? And that's always the answer from the Romans and the Greeks. If you want slaves, you go east into the hot sun, and those are the people that submit themselves to these crazy ruler gods who always claim they're god kings. And for the most part, the Greeks certainly didn't do that, and the Romans didn't until they started getting the divine Julius Caesar nonsense going on. But I think that's part of the reason. I think it's embedded. Do you think there's a different reason? Yeah. We'll debate this, I'm sure, over the next few meals.
Sure.
Pour a few extra bottles of wine, see what we can come up with. I'm out of time. That just doesn't seem fair. Okay, so what we'll do, it is not an entirely unreasonable place to stop. I want to show you over at 427D, page 105. (427D). Socrates says, "So then, son of Ariston, I said, your city would now be founded. In the next place, get yourself an adequate light somewhere, and look yourself, calling your brother and Polemarchus and the others, whether we can somehow see where the justice might be and where the injustice, in what they differ from one another, and which the man who's going to be happy must possess, whether it escapes the notice of all gods and humans or not." All right, reminding ourselves what this is all about, solving the challenge of the myth of the Ring of Gyges. But look at the response. "You're talking nonsense," said Glaucon. Why does he say that? "You promised you would look for it because it's not holy for you not to bring help to justice in every way in your power." Notice what Socrates just said. Go get a light somewhere. Good luck. I'm going home. Right? See that? Your city's founded. Go find justice. Leave me out of it. Glaucon says, no, not so fast, Buster. You got us into this. But notice Socrates' response. "What you remind me of is true," I said, "and though I must do so, you too have to join in. We'll do so." Now, this is the fundamental model of Socratic teaching, right? It's a joint effort. The student is the teacher is the student. Collegial. So keep that in mind as we're going through this. "Now then," I said, "I hope I'll find it in this way. This is justice. I suppose our city, if that is it has been correctly founded, is perfectly good. Necessarily, plainly then, it's wise, courageous, moderate, and just, the four cardinal virtues. Of course, therefore, just as with any four things, if we were seeking any one of them in something or other and recognize it first, that would be enough for us. But if we recognize the other three first, this would also suffice for the recognition of the thing looked for, because plainly it can be anything else but what's left over." "What you say is correct," he said. "With these things too, since they happen to be four, mustn't we look for them in the same way?" "Plainly." "Well, it's wisdom, in my opinion, which first comes plainly to light, and something about it looks strange." It's never going to be the easy way, just find justice and be done with the matter. No, let's find wisdom, moderation, and courage first, and then we'll find justice. Right? Of course. That's why the book is thick. Yeah. Now, right here is where we get the virtues in the city. This is where I want you to start reading for next class up to the end of book 4. This stuff is absolutely loaded. So read carefully, thoughtfully, and think about how all the pieces fit together. And remember, the analogy between the city and the soul, the structural similarity and how, which you haven't seen yet, you will. The structural similarity and then how the virtues play out in both. Then, what is justice and how does Socrates resolve actual challenge of the myth, because at the end of book 4, suddenly it's over. And you might be like, what happened? Did I fall asleep? You know, the credits, remember the Law and Order credits would come on and be like, I missed the whole show. You know? So don't let that happen to you. Back up and find the answer. And next class, we'll dive into the structure of the city and the virtues, prove the analogy, and solve this. Everyone good? All right, see you next week.